Ironically, going back again, now we talked about the primordial perfection and how we fell away from being within God. And this is from Frank and Lydia Hammer. They said, if we have not learned that God is in man and man in God again, that to love thy God is to love thy brother, and to serve thy God is to serve each other, then Christ was born in vain. Some very simple understandings become like this huge, immense body of discipline that we now must embody, which is service to God and to other in this space as we travel into the higher heavenly spheres.
So also part of this 24th mystery is, of course, death as initiation. And so, if I may read this, death is the friend that frees you. It has the key to the door that can be opened in no other way, and liberates the soul from the bondage of the flesh. Continuing on, death changes a man no more than one moving from one city to another. Death is not an escape from the consequences of one's acts. There is no escape from life and its problems. Death doesn't absolve sins. Death is no gain.
Exactly. And this is one of the things that just a common misunderstanding of people early in the spiritual development, this idea that when a person dies, that they all of a sudden have this grand osmosis of knowledge and wisdom that comes upon them. And that is simply not true. That it is no gain. What we learn in life is where we begin in death. And this is part of the reason it's so important that people understand, asking the spirits or the Ouija boards and all those things. You're asking souls that are just random, lost and wandering spirits to answer questions for which they have absolutely no qualification after life any more than they had during life. And so, a lot of people too will say things like, well, I'll learn that when I die, or I'll do this when I die. It's like, you're not getting it. The whole point is to go through this process while living. There is an essential characteristic of having to embody it in the physical form and then bringing it to eternity. And so that is missing the point, and missing it in a pretty grand way that it's like, it literally is saying, I'll put off the work of this life until I die. And it's like, well, how does that make sense, really? There's a reason why we're here, and part of it is to embody knowledge, embody these things, bring that which is of heaven to earth within embodiment, within the physical form, and to undergo those purifications while in the physical body. It's necessary. And so saying you're going to do it when you die is saying you're going to come back and try again.
Because that's
so that's what you're saying. So just make sure you understand it.
The whole goal of being here is the transformation of the soul. So
exactly.
Hey, you're just going to go on a vacation for a while and go to Earth and go jet skiing. And, it's actually like, okay, soul, and it's not like I've heard, I don't know what you feel about this, but that there's, many souls waiting to come into this beautiful place of Earth, this Earth school. And so it's a gift to come here. And then we come here, but the total forgetfulness, we just kind of forget why we came here. But we're coming here for a reason. It's not just to go on vacation.
Exactly.
Although, it's a beautiful thing that we get to experience. The wisdom of the body, all the yoga cleats is getting into. I mean, there's 72,000 nerve endings in our hands and the bottom of our feet, and just the way that the body works, it's just incredible. What a geez, good job, God. That's did a good job. But we're here, we get this chance to really evolve as a soul and grow and learn. And wow, we really have a lot of tools. And thank you too for like digging up a lot of these tools that aren't readily available to us. And also to be journeying to spaces. And it's not easy to bring all that back. And so you had to be very diligent to write them down, you know, and then process them and then write about them and share with them because you wanted to. And so thank you for doing that.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for pointing that out, because that is very true. I mean, it has been a true act of discipline to do that. It's funny because you'll have the most mind-bending, beautiful out-of-body experience, and go to the highest heavens, and you're like, oh my God, this is wonderful, and you come back and you're like, oh my God, I have to write that down. I have to somehow make that make sense in words. Oh my gosh, so yeah, there is a great deal of discipline involved in bringing it to fruition physically that sometimes I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I did that.
Well, it was a lot.
Yeah, because I'm like struggling more and more as I get older too, just keep up. And but yes, and yeah, because it wasn't just that I wanted to, it was that I was consistently told, far greater significance, you must do this. And it's like, really? I'm tired. I just want to enjoy the experience. But, there was always that other side of it, which was, okay, well, now you got to do the work too. It's just, you got to write it down. You got to encapsulate it. You got to go look up the texts that, you were shown. And so there is a part of it.
This goes into the next mystery, the 25th mystery, initiation into the palace of ancient knowledge. So in a way, or is it ancient? I'm not sure.
Well, we could go with that. We
Okay.
could definitely go with that.
And that's kind of like a lot of the work that you've been doing is you've been bringing a palace of ancient knowledge, kind of, and a lot of it's here. And organizing, you're like a librarian.
I am like one of my little books.
You got the glasses. We both got them.
Organizing them. Oh my gosh, it's not a place.
She's the senior librarian, and I'm an apprentice, a librarian.
Yes, ironically, in dialogues too, you'll see it even more with Seeker. He would crack jokes about, because he called himself the Padawan and I was the master. We joked about it. It was a little funny thing, but he would call me the Jedi librarian. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, I know exactly where that one is. Yeah. It's right over here.
Well, I can see like if he's talking about the Yoda, because you got like that look kind of.
Yes, I do. I have the Yoda look. And that I did when I saw that they made the new Mandalorian Star Wars cereal with a picture of Baby Yoda on it. I actually bought it to try it because I was like, how can you not try the Baby Yoda cereal? Okay. You have to try it. But it's it's all right. It's got some marshmallows and some corn pops in it, so it's a little twist on a few themes, and I guess the marshmallows are supposed to be like one of the Alliance fighters, and the corn puff balls are supposed to be like what is that? The great big dark star.
Ooh, Death Star?
Yeah,
I have like some giant comic books from about like 45 years ago where they were like really big ones, you know what I'm saying? That's why I can't get back far enough, but they're like the big ones. They're like $1.
Yes, I remember going. We had one in Dayton, Ohio, where they had them in the plastic coverings, the older ones. And, my brother loved Edgar Rice Burroughs books, but they had all the comic books in the store too. And it was so cool. I was thinking about that the other day about, we've lost a lot of fun little things that were part of our youth, like those things, the old bookstores, the old record stores, things like that.
Video stores.
Yes, those
Now,
were fun.
you wrote a whole book on the Palace of Ancient Knowledge.
I sure did. And it's a compendium of mysteries and visions and mystical and out of body experiences that answered these mysteries in at least one view. Because there's always more.
There's many different
But
floors, and they have
yeah,
different music
yes,
playing, and
definitely. There's like, and so, in the 25th mystery, it says, it is thus the ancient sacred texts, the knowledge contained within them, and the vibration of their volumes, which ascends the initiate to this next phase upon the pathway into the city of the new Jerusalem. And I started out by saying, and so enters the initiate into the wisdom of all the ages from every creed and faith. Unbeknownst to the soul, the pathway has been laid with a mighty staircase of ancient sacred texts containing the secret wisdoms bequeathed by every prophet, saint, mystic, sage, and ascetic throughout time and history, not then lost in an impermanent library at Alexandria, but contained within the most ethereal of libraries in the city of the New Jerusalem, the palace of ancient knowledge. 6 floors, everything is white, but golden gilded. So the staircases, circular white, very large gold gilding, has scrolls and books. The books are like this big.
like the Star Wars comic book I
Yeah,
had.
they're huge. They're huge.
But
And
they were like 3 or 4 foot, right?
yeah, they are. And
Yeah. Or they are.
they're they really are. And it's interesting because um all these decades I've had visions of the ancient sacred texts, and in many of these visions they will appear huge like this,
Hmm.
and what's really cool about it was that just even touching them, you are taking in, ingesting the energy of these texts. It's beautiful, beautiful. One of my favorite places in the universe. It's in the city of New Jerusalem. And what I just read was so important because it's going back to what I'm always talking about, which is the staircase of ancient sacred texts from earth to heaven, because I've seen it many, many, many times where, it is, we walk upon each body of knowledge takes us a step higher on that staircase. So this is something that is so important to convey. And so in this 25th mystery, um, that's what's happening now. The initiate is being taken into those bodies of knowledge. They are hidden from sight, ready to come when I will, all which takes place when I repeat a thing by heart. What we learn to do is to, he's speaking of the repetitions that we learn to do in the discipline pathway with these texts, where each repetition contains within it a deeper understanding of the mystery of the words. There's always the surface understanding of the words, and then there's all these other levels of the knowledge in these ancient sacred texts. And so that's where you're going in the 25th. But as we go into the 26th.
Well, before you go, I just want to say one thing about the 25th.
Sure.
It reminds me a little bit of, I think I mentioned to you Schwaller de Lubitsch. You heard of him?
No.
He hung out at Luxor for like 30 years of his life.
Oh, okay.
He broke it down. He wrote a book called The Temple of Man. He's written many books. But what the initiates would do is, because they built it like a man, like with part of the temple is the head, and then part is like the neck and the shoulders and the rib cage and the heart and the organs and all the way down to the feet. And this is giant, huge structure. And so initiates would come and they would, let's just say the head, right? And they knew what the pineal gland was and the pituitary
Yes, they
gland
did. Mm-hmm.
thousands and thousands of years ago. And they knew this. Oh, how'd you know that? And so the initiates would come, and it wasn't so much about reading the hieroglyphs and absorb, which is a totally different way, hieroglyphs of using the mind and how we learn. But they would just go and be in the energy of it. So they would sit in the head of the temple and just hang for like
Yes,
absorbing the energy. So I wonder if going to the Palace of Ancient Knowledge.
absolutely. It is absolutely that. And it's not just going to the Palace of Ancient Knowledge, which is in the mystical spheres. It is when we visit the ancient sacred texts, when we're reading the ancient sacred texts, um, we are sitting in the energy of it.
Awesome.
It transforms us, in that way. I know that a good example, I'd gotten you interested. I can't remember how it came up, but I mentioned Training the Mind in the Great Way, which was the great book by the first Dalai Lama. And you literally embodied that text with, you were like all over it. And I remember telling you also, I said, as excited as you are about the training in the mind in the Great Way, every single one of these ancient sacred texts will do the same thing. You will become obsessed with them for a time because they are these steps from earth to heaven. And so there is this knowledge that you're embodying when you're reading those texts and taking in this wisdom from these friends of God, who also went to a great deal of trouble and work, especially when you look at some of these things in the time frame in which they wrote them and the difficulty in writing at those times, that they managed to write these voluminous things when it was really difficult to write, and get enough stuff to write with,
and preserve them for
yeah. I look at the writings of the church fathers, the earlier church fathers, and I'm like, how did they do that? Because they were dealing with papyrus and stuff, and I don't even know what they were dealing with. But some of these things, like the past vows of the Earth Store Bodhisattva, this is very, very old. And he was one who traveled to the hell realms as well and liberated souls, and he was a bodhisattva from the Buddhist tradition. But there's so many, and
one of the things too is when I read stuff like Training the Mind in the Great Way, part of me just wants to go, okay, I'm going to drop everything and just study that and master it. That's a lifetime study. And there's all these texts that are lifetime studies.
Yes.
So there's sort of just a quality about them.
Yes. Ironically, again, yesterday when I was editing, I'll bring this up, because here we were, this experience that Seeker had about eating the texts, ingesting the texts. And one of the admonitions he was given was that he was going too slow. And why haven't you read this one? You haven't read this one? No, you haven't read it. And he's in the library, in the library of the ancient texts and the mystical, and they're telling him, you need to do this. And I explained to him, I said, what's happening here is that you are attached to worldly ideas of study, and you need to ingest the texts. That means don't take notes, don't highlight, don't write in the book and do all these things and spend a year on each text. Read the book, ingest it, and let the Holy Spirit embody it within you. And so he was being instructed to, escalate the
tempo.
The tempo, yes, because it's all for every one of us. It's different. Like in your case, you did a lot of listening over and over to a lot of these books that I wrote because you were being drawn to, because we were going to do this and we didn't know it, and with Seeker, he was being told, you need to do this more quickly, because there were things he didn't know about. You're wasting time. You need to be prepared for your destiny, your mission, and you need to focus on the things we tell you to focus on, not everything else. And so it was an interesting thing about how important this ingestion of the texts were. And you look back at the book of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel is told to eat these books and then immediately go tell the world of what I have told you. It's showing us there is this quality of ingestion, digestion, in taking in the knowledge, because some of the things that we read in these texts, we're not going to understand it ever on a grounded level. And so we take it in knowing that that meaning, that embodiment will unravel itself within us, just like training the mind in the great way really unraveled. And it had the same impact on me as well. But like I said, many of the ancient sacred texts, they will grab a hold of you. And it doesn't mean you can't spend some time on them, because you certainly can, but it's getting this idea and impression and understanding of, but I need to take in more and more and more. I need to ingest, I need to digest.
And so for me, here's my, I turned it off. Here's my phone. And so I go to Audible, and then I have 50 of your books, maybe more. And so they're at my fingertips, these ancient sacred texts. And then somebody, her name happens to be Marilynn Hughes, but somebody just went through all these texts and devoured them and spit them back out in a really organized way with an intention to assist souls who are seeking this kind of stuff. And so it's just at my fingertips. So I just have it, so I can listen to it anytime I want.
Yeah.
I have my little headphone with me in my pocket, and I just have one in and one out, because I don't think you're supposed to drive with both in, And so when I'm bringing my son to school or something, I'll have it in. I can still talk to him, and I'm listening to it, or I take him to the park, or when I can listen to whatever the heck I want, pretty much, all the time. And then when I have 50 different ones or so, then you're not always interested in one particular subject in a given day.
Right.
One of the 50 you're going to be interested in, and
yeah.
then and interest has to do with, for me, how much I'm going to take it in. Because if I have a hunger
Yes.
for something, or a desire or an appetite for a particular subject, then I'll be like, oh, because then I can absorb it because I have an empty space for it. So I never force myself. It's only when
and see, that's an interesting way you put it too, because that is a couple things. One is that I did that too, and I do that with, I took a lot of classes on audio, and I would just listen to them over and over again until I felt like I had really ingested,
Yeah, I do that.
And that was helpful, and with reading, I have a different procedure, but this is reminding me too of how, and I've told people this before, and people have told me this, that they appreciate that I did devour the ancient texts and kind of present it in an organized fashion. And people can look at it that way, because that's really, I think, partly what God was trying to have me do is, because not everyone can do that. You know what I mean? Not everyone can go collect all the texts and do that. And so it does provide that organization and kind of helping people to pull it out in the different areas of study, because as you know, there's my experiences, there's the how-to books, and then there's the Voice of the Prophets, which is just an encyclopedia of texts, and then different books that go into all sorts of subject matters as well. And so it simplifies it, I think.
Yeah, well, I also mentioned to you about the Bodhi Tree bookstore in LA that
Okay.
closed down in 2011, but it had from A to Z, thousands of teachers like this,
Yeah.
just line,
Wow.
A through Z, just the mysteries and metaphysics and breakthrough with human potential and whatever. And so I would just go there and I'd start at A and I'd just go all the way through in that bookstore till I get to Z, and I'd spend sometimes, the whole day. And then I could only buy so many books, and I write down authors and the title of the book, and I try to go to YouTube and see if the author would be giving an interview, and
Right.
talking about the subject or something like that, so I could absorb it faster. And so, but it's kind of like the Palace of Ancient Knowledge too, and the Bodhi
Yes.
Tree, and to bring that to the work that you're doing. But if I had somebody that went to the Bodhi Tree, that read all the books and then collated them and brought them down to where someone could understand all that stuff in a quicker fashion, That's
Yes.
one thing that you've done like really well.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah. And that is something that I do think when people take this and actually try to read the book as well, because it has, these organized things from the texts to, really illustrate for people um, of these different mysteries, the different rites that we're going through. And so, yes, so that being the 25th mystery, that really is the Palace of Ancient Knowledge. I mean, it's a beautiful place. It's in the city of New Jerusalem. And one of my favorite places, honestly. I have a lot of favorites, so I guess I can't really say. But
So the 26th mystery, initiations into royal captivity.
oh, yes.
Having fallen from grace in the original Garden of Eden, the initiate must restore himself to the purity which transpired before the fall of man, and this clandestine epiphany of perfect, eternal, and unitive love as manifested before the disobedience of man to Creator.
Yes. And this is where, ironically, mystical language starts taking over. When you go into royal captivity, this is your royal captivity, the soul in captivity to God. And so I utilized in this chapter some of the things that I wrote as I was entering into this royal captivity. This is from the mystical captive. Instant conspiring to meet God alone, reason entering energetic form, timelessness drizzles into our soul. As shackles of love contain our heart's core, archaic conclusions are joined with our past as embers of light open our quest, looking for signs of exuding grace, spinning and yearning toward God's face. And that's just the beginning of it. But you do start speaking, you move into this energy that is like this. You understand the roomies of the world and why we speak in poetic form when we enter into these really ecstatic, heightened places of spiritual ecstasy, and that's what this royal captivity is that we are now not just embracing being, God's slave. Let's be real here, but we love it. We want it because now that we've gone through the whole fall and falling away, we realize what a gift it was in its initial innocence. We want it back, you know. And this is where the joy resides, in royal captivity to God. This is where peace resides, you know. And this is from the Royal Question. Again, another one. Unless God reveal the lover, you can never reveal your innermost secrets. I live in the call of the world and its wreckage, but hence the lover continually calls through the whirlwind of the night into the crevasse of the human mind to gather within it the knowledge that fills its world with lacking, the void that remains in all human hearts, which seeks to find its own, often disguised as the call of a lover, is often the interior reckoning of the beloved. Speaking, of course, of God. And this is again the higher and higher and higher constructs of this bridal mysticism as you are really moving into that. And so there's some stuff in here from John von Ruysbroek about the adornment of the spiritual marriage, which is about that bridal union. He says here, the spirit forever continues to burn in itself, for its love is eternal, and it feels itself ever more and more to be burnt up in love, for it is drawn and transformed into the unity of God, where the spirit burns in love. If it observes itself, it finds a distinction and an otherness between itself and God. But where it is burnt up, it is undifferentiated and without distinction. That's And again, take that in, because that's what this is. That's what the 26th mystery is. That's royal captivity, the bosom of God's loving embrace.
That's so poetic.
Yes, it very much is.
And so this is what imbues the Mystical Captive series.
It does. It does. It's a lot of, that's one of my favorites to write, was the Mystical Captive and the Solitary series, because these were climbing into some of the highest heights. You know, after serving a great deal in the hells and the lower spheres, this was these journeys into the ecstatic bliss of God. You know, and this is this fragrance of the mystical rose as we are coming closer to the garden, the beautiful garden of God, you know.
So when you're talking about your times of serving in hell, you could say, if somebody said, "How was it?" you could say, "That was hell."
Yes, you could say that. But the irony would be is that those periods generated deep compassion, and they were filled with realizations that were so pivotal in the spiritual winds of progress, so to speak. You know, speaking of which, you go into the 27th, which is the ritual passage from this world into the solitary winds. To be initiated into the solitary winds requires that the initiate be released from all attachments to worldly energies, seeking to grasp only the fine thread of virtue and to leave behind all trace of shadow in the lingering winds of misuse. So you're entering again into yet another purification, which, you know, we will all be continuing to higher and higher and higher purifications throughout this life. But in this phase, you're going into a unique status of awareness, where you literally do shut out the physical world. Your focus becomes completely interior. And this is partly why the solitary, the solitary aspect of it is so necessary, because you are going within completely in this 27th rite. Because literally, think about birth, you know. So now we're in the womb of God, and we're going to be birthed into this heavenly garden wherein the fragrance resides, because we're heading towards the 28th, which will be the entry into that enclosed garden of God that we've been working towards all along. And so, I spoke of in the solitary, and now the ocean of being contains all that the solitary once was, and the receptacle of light has become the solitary. There is no more. There is nothing else. There is no more need. There is only transcendental existence. Here we are in the birth canal of God, being, solitary, alone, getting ready for the stirrings and the birth pangs, so that we can yet be born into this higher world again, into this next beautiful place. And here, this is from Peng Yun, a Zen poet, who says, "Without name and form, well versed in the Buddha way, I go the non-way, without abandoning my ordinary person's affairs, the conditioned and name and form. All are flowers in the sky, nameless and formless. I leave birth and death." And that is what is happening here. And here is also, I remember this beautiful out-of-body experience I had where I had undergone confession and repentance and contrition and all these purifications. And I still wondered, because there were sins that I was ashamed of, And I had this beautiful experience where I was taken in the presence of the Blessed Virgin. And we read in the Gospels that God will blot out our sins. We don't really understand, what does that mean? When I stood in front of the Blessed Virgin and I tried to speak of it, she looked at me with complete bewilderment because my sins were no longer remembered. God did not remember them. She did not know of them. This is what purification does. This is the transformation, the transmutation. We become a new man. So Ernest Holmes put it this way: nothing ever happened in the past to hinder or hurt. There is no past, and I know and can see that there is no belief in any past to rise against me. I live in the now, free from any yesterdays or tomorrows. Now I am happy, free, and complete. It says it very, very well. And then, of course, in the 28th mystery, ritual of reentry into the enclosed garden of God, to shut out mortality in the garment of immortality, and to return all mortal remnants to the world below in an ascending pattern of light, locked up, always ascending, with the pattern of diminution forever terminus, the consummation of the Spirit with Almighty God complete, destination final and infinite. And so this is the enclosed garden of God. And from The Secret Rose Garden by Florence Lederer, this bouquet of scented blossoms I have plucked from that garden and have called it the Secret Rose Garden. In it are blooming roses of the mysteries of the heart. Untold before, in it the tongues of the lilies are all singing, and the eyes of the narcissus behold all far and near. Gaze on each one of these with your heart's eyes till your doubts melt away. And the mystical rose, the fragrance of the mystical rose. Who is the mystical rose? I'm going to come back just a moment. I'll be right back. One of these things. The mystical rose, Blessed Virgin Mother, Rosa Mystica, the mystical rose, fragrance of the mystical rose. The Blessed Mother has always been called the mystical rose. She appeared in 1947 in this manner with the white, red, and the gold roses to call mankind to repentance and redemption. And she pointed out the errors of our ways and the things that we were not doing correctly. And she specifically called on those who are in religious life, priests, nuns, monks, etc., in that apparition. The mystical rose is the Blessed Mother. And we speak of the fragrance of the mystical rose. In the Catholic tradition, but this has been known to occur in all traditions, when the presence of a saint or a holy individual is near, either physically sometimes or spiritually, people will often smell roses. They experienced this with Padre Pio, St. Padre Pio, with St. Therese of Lisieux, with the Blessed Mother, and with many saints. I've experienced it twice, experiencing the fragrance of the mystical rose when I experienced the presence of St. Padre Pio. It's a very profound and beautiful experience. We talk about fragrance mysticism, which is one of the further books in this series. We're talking about the fragrance of holiness. The fragrance of holiness is that of what is beautiful, the flowers, the rose, which is the epitome of God's creation. When you go into the lower hells, you smell putrid smells. You smell rotting, decomposition, death. So the fragrance of the mystical rose is our constant desire and ascent to reaching that which is holy in the enclosed garden of God, and seeking out that righteousness, that redemption, that salvation that is available to every one of us, but doing so with intention and with discipline and with a direction. So the fragrance of the mystical rose is fragrance of holiness, the fragrance of the saints, the prophets, saints, mystics, sages, and ascetics, fragrance of holiness. And all the saints spoke of this in their mystical visions. Many of them spoke of the fragrances of the roses on the highest heights of heaven. And that's what we're doing now that we're in the enclosed garden of God. We are in the fragrance.
You know, one thing with essential oils is metaphysically the rose, maybe I've mentioned this to you before, the rose has the highest vibration of all the essential oils.
I think you may have mentioned that to me before, and that's a very interesting point, isn't it?
The smell is so instinctive. It
Mm-hmm.
can completely change one's demeanor. Have you ever watched any of Jessica Lange's movies?
I have, but I don't remember.
She'll often use music and smells, or the way that she gets into her characters and such. So she'll
Okay.
smell because it's so instinctive. It just kind of goes to the core.
Yes.
It's like rose. It just takes over the whole being in a way. But also the
Yes.
rose is like is related to the sun. Yes? Isn't the sun, like the rose, one of the most beautiful expressions of the sun?
Yes, because the rose rises, towards the sun. What we see is all life rises towards the sun. And we talked about that earlier on in the journey, the universal sun being very similar in the way you experience it as to this celestial body we see as the sun and stars, but higher vibrations of those things. And, so we see that life rises to light and death descends into the darkness, into the death, and the depths. And
wasn't in the initiations into the mysteries that we spoke of every petal of the rose being a different saint or prophet?
I think we might have talked about that. I do, but I ironically here, Pensatia, one of my faves, in case you haven't figured that out yet. Tall, forbidding, yet challenging, it appeared to beckon to disciples of the rose. Behold, Pensatia, spoke Master H, climb this all, must ere they pass on to the step. The ladder was most steep, Gray emptiness, fog-like veiled either side, no one coming or going. The awesome heights chilled my blood. Only barren rungs of ladder reaching up. Evasion was impossible. Climb one must. Yet an inner peace sensitized me as a mandate that only by obedience would this step be realized. Every part of my being made the effort to ascend upon the arduous task, yet all struggles failed. Struggle not, Pensatia, stand still and know the effortless way is the highest law. That is, the disciple learns as he travels the path that only as one completely turns all over to God can one achieve victory and life everlasting. Now try the Father's way. Learn to work with the silence. And you experience a great deal of this in the spiritual path, that when you literally surrender to God and literally fall into God's arms, you soar, speed of light and beyond. And this is because when you surrender to God, that's when you're giving your spirit power to move forward. When we hold ourselves fast in our own self-intelligence, our own ideas, we get stuck and we slow way down. And so the enclosed garden of God is just a beautiful, beautiful oasis of silence. But yet all flowers and roses are all there, that scents.
There's some key ideas here.
Sure.
This 28th mystery being the final ascent of the initiate, the fragrance of the mystical rose only found in the enclosed garden of God, the ritual of all ends, and the initiation to end all being, initiation into the annihilation of all selfhood, and initiation into nothing, the ritual of inner peace, the initiation into the knowledge of all things and beyond knowledge, the final ascent into knowledgelessness. These are interesting concepts, but we're really shedding everything and coming to a void,
Yes.
so to speak, of nothingness, of knowledgelessness.
We find in our emptiness, in our knowledgelessness, and letting go of all, that there is the greatest bliss. And yet our false selves tell us the opposite.
And what we're
That's
left
where
with,
we reside, in the God's bosom. I'm sorry, what?
and what we're left with is the beautiful scent of the high vibrational rose,
Yes. Yes.
the expression of beauty of our beautiful sun.
And I'm going to add something here, which is included in it's called a note on the 28 mysteries. It's kind of an addendum, but this is from the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi. Rumi is one of my favorite mystics, and apparently he's one of the most popular poets in the world. He says, "The story admits of being told up to this point, but what follows is hidden and inexpressible in words. If you should speak and try 100 ways to express it, 'tis useless, the mystery becomes no clearer. You can ride on saddle and horse to the seacoast, but then you must use a horse of wood, a boat. A horse of wood is useless on dry land. It is the special vehicle of voyagers by sea. Silence is this horse of wood. Silence is the guide and support of men at sea." And he's speaking of the voyagers who travel in the spirit world when he says this. And here is something, I mean, just to show, I'm going to show a couple of things that I think are good. To show this is universal, goes across all fields of religious belief. This is from Thrice Greatest Hermes. The sistrum, which is the ancient Egyptian musical instrument, also shows that existent things must be shaken up and never have cessation from impulse, but as it were be wakened up and agitated when they fall asleep and die away. For it is fabled to bring forth one, then two, and then three, and four, and five at a birth, and then adds one by one until seven, so that in all she brings forth 8 and 20, the number of lights, 28. And from the Atuvataka, which is Buddhism, this is the Buddhist sayings. The Lord taught a holy life. This is the path followed by the great, pursued by the lofty sages. Those who enter that course as taught by the enlightened one, heeding the teacher's instruction, will make an end of suffering.
And there's also 28 angels who rule the 28 mansions.
And all the signs that are set over these. Yes, so excellent that you remembered that. And it says here, now every one of these spirits is a great prince and has much power and freedom in the dominion of his own planets and signs. And this is again going back to the eons that were spoken of in the Pistis Sophia, the eons, the dominions, the powers, and the rulers, when they were talking about these 28 angels who rule in 28 mansions. You know, so.
That's great. Well, I feel that this was pretty epic. And is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, let me just, oh, yes. We're going to show, again, here's from St. Ambrose. And so, as a garden inaccessible from without, smells of the violet, is scented with the olive, and is resplendent with the rose, that religion may increase in the vine, peace in the olive, and the modesty of the rose. To work then, and if you wish your garden to be sweet after this sort, enclose it with the precept of the prophets. Quote, set a watch before thy mouth and a door to thy lips, unquote. That sums it up quite well.